My name is Sarah Jenkins. I am 36 years old, and exactly 2 years ago, my ex-husband stole my twin daughters using a fabricated psychiatric report legally banning me from coming within 500 feet of them. He told the judge I was unhinged. He told my girls I had abandoned them. I thought the sheer, suffocating agony of losing them was the absolute worst thing I would ever have to survive in this lifetime. But then, the hospital called. One of my 10-year-old twins had acute leukemia, and when the doctors ran routine DNA tests to find a bone marrow match, it unleashed a biological secret so impossible, it blew his entire web of lies to pieces. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. Numbers don't lie. That is the one universal truth I've clung to over the past 2 years. People lie. Husbands lie. Lawyers and paid-off psychiatrists definitely lie. But a balanced ledger, a solid tax return, those are honest. That's why I became a forensic auditor. I track down missing money for a living. I find the discrepancies that people try to hide in the shadows. It was a Tuesday afternoon, late August 2025. The Seattle rain was beating against the window of the small, second-floor office I shared with my business partner and best friend, Jess Palmer. I was staring blindly at a spreadsheet, my eyes burning. It was August 28th. Exactly 730 days since Judge Ramirez banged his gavel and granted Robert Sterling, my ex-husband, full sole custody of our twin daughters, Emma and Chloe. Sarah, you've been staring at that same offshore account routing number for an hour, Jess said, walking into my office and dropping a lukewarm cup of deli coffee on my desk. Give it a rest, honey. You're running on fumes. I blinked, rubbing my temples. I can't, Jess. If I stop crunching numbers, I start thinking about the date. And if I think about the date, I'm going to lose my mind. Jess sighed, her expression softening. She was a fiery, no-nonsense woman from Chicago who didn't usually deal in pity, but she knew what today was. She had been there in the courtroom 2 years ago. She had watched Robert, a slick 40-year-old real estate lawyer who wore Armani suits and a perpetual smirk, destroy my life. Robert was a masterclass narcissist. When I finally found the courage to file for divorce to escape his suffocating control and emotional abuse, he didn't just let me go. He decided to punish me. He hired a shady psychiatrist to write a bogus mental health evaluation claiming I suffered from severe emotional instability and posed a danger to my kids. It was a complete lie, but Robert had the money, the legal connections, and the silver tongue to sell it. He got full custody. He even got a 500-foot restraining order against me. For 2 years, my birthday presents were returned unopened. My letters were shredded. I was a ghost in my own children's lives. I know it hurts, Sarah, Jess said gently, pulling up a chair. But you're burning the midnight oil every single night. You're going to make yourself sick. You need to head home. I don't have a home, Jess, I whispered, my voice cracking. Just an apartment with 2 empty bedrooms. Before Jess could reply, my cell phone buzzed on the desk. The caller ID flashed an unknown local Seattle number. I normally let those go to voicemail, assuming it was a spam call or a client dodging an audit. But something, call it a mother's intuition, call it a cold chill running down my spine, made me pick it up. Hello? Is this Sarah Jenkins? A woman's voice asked. She sounded calm, professional, but carrying an unmistakable weight. Speaking. Ms. Jenkins, this is Dr. Aris from the Pediatric Oncology Unit at Seattle Children's Hospital. I'm calling regarding your daughter, Emma. The air left my lungs. The spreadsheet on my monitor blurred into a sea of meaningless green lines. Emma? Is she okay? What happened? Jess immediately sat up straight, her eyes locked on me. Ms. Jenkins, I need you to listen to me carefully, Dr. Aris said, her voice steadying my rising panic. Emma was brought into the emergency room early this morning by her father. She had been experiencing extreme fatigue, bone pain, and severe bruising. We ran some blood work, and I'm afraid the results are highly concerning. Her white blood cell count is critically low, and we found blast cells in her peripheral blood. I felt the room tilt. What does that mean? We suspect acute myeloid leukemia, Dr. Aris said gently but firmly. AML. It's an aggressive cancer of the blood and bone marrow. We are admitting her to the ICU right now. She is going to need a bone marrow transplant, and time is of the essence. Leukemia. Cancer. My 10-year-old baby girl had cancer. I'm coming, I gasped, already shoving my laptop into my bag, my hands trembling so violently I could barely zip it. I'm in downtown Seattle. I can be there in 20 minutes. But, doctor, I have a problem. My ex-husband has full custody. There's a restraining order. If I show up, Robert will have me arrested. Listen to me, Sarah. Dr. Aris interrupted, her tone brooking no argument. Under Washington state law, life-threatening medical emergencies supersede family court restraining orders regarding biological parents. Emma is fighting for her life, and we are going to need to test you as a potential bone marrow donor anyway. You have every legal right to be here. Just come straight to the 4th floor and ask for me. I hung up the phone. I couldn't breathe. Sarah? What is it? Jess asked, already reaching for her car keys. Emma, I choked out, the tears finally spilling over. She has leukemia, Jess. My little girl has cancer. Oh my God, Jess whispered. Jess. She didn't waste another second. Go. I'll hold down the fort here. I'll cancel all your client meetings for the week. Just go to your baby. The drive to Seattle Children's Hospital was a blur of gray pavement and agonizing memories. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, replaying Dr. Aris's words. Acute myeloid leukemia. How had Robert let it get this far? If she was exhibiting severe fatigue and bruising, why hadn't he taken her to a pediatrician weeks ago? I sprinted through the automatic sliding doors of the hospital, ignoring the bewildered looks of the receptionist, and jammed the elevator button for the 4th floor. Pediatric oncology. The words alone felt like a death sentence. When the elevator doors parted, I was met by walls painted with cheerful cartoon animals. A cruel, jarring contrast to the pale, sick children and exhausted parents wandering the halls. Dr. Aris met me at the nurse's station. She was a tall woman in her 50s with kind but tired eyes. She took one look at my panicked face and gently guided me into a quiet consultation room. She's stable for the moment, Dr. Aris assured me before I could even ask. But she is very weak. We need to start induction chemotherapy within the next 48 hours to wipe out the cancerous cells. But the ultimate cure will rely on finding a matching bone marrow donor. Sibling matches are usually our best bet. Because Emma is a twin, her sister Chloe has a 25% chance of being a perfect match. We need to test Chloe, you, and Mr. Sterling immediately. Where is she? I pleaded. Can I see her? She's in room 412. But Sarah, prepare yourself. 2 years is a long time for a child, and she is very frightened right now. I walked down the hallway, every step feeling like I was walking through wet cement. When I reached room 412, I stopped in the doorway, my hand hovering over the handle. I pushed it open slowly. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor filled the sterile room. And there, swallowed up by a massive white hospital bed, was my Emma. She looked so small. Her normally bright cheeks were a translucent ashen gray. Dark purple bruises mapped her delicate arms where they had inserted the IV lines. Sitting in a chair in the corner of the room was my other half, Chloe. But the sight of Chloe almost made me drop to my knees. She didn't look like a healthy 10-year-old. She was shockingly thin, frail, hunched over, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. She looked like a child who had spent 2 years walking on eggshells. Emma? I whispered, my voice breaking. Emma slowly turned her head. Her dark, sunken eyes widened. For a split second, I saw pure confusion. Robert had told them I didn't want them. He had spent 2 years brainwashing them. Mommy. Emma's voice was a fragile, raspy thread. I couldn't hold it back anymore. I rushed to the bedside, falling to my knees and gently taking her small, freezing hand in mine. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Mommy's here, and I am never, ever leaving you again. I looked over my shoulder at Chloe, offering her a watery, desperate smile. Hi, my sweet Chloe. Come here. But Chloe didn't run to me. Instead, she shrank back into the vinyl hospital chair, her eyes wide with a conditioned, deeply instilled terror. She looked past me, staring at the open doorway. I followed her gaze. Standing in the doorway was Robert. He hadn't changed. He was wearing a custom-tailored navy suit, not a hair out of place, looking completely out of sync with the tragedy unfolding in the room. But his eyes, those cold, calculating, dead eyes, were fixed on me with absolute venom. What the hell is she doing here? Robert hissed, stepping into the room and immediately bringing a suffocating tension with him. Chloe physically flinched at the sound of his voice. I stood up, squaring my shoulders, pulling every ounce of the fierce, unyielding auditor inside me to the surface. My daughter has cancer, Robert. I'm staying. "You have a restraining order, Sarah," he sneered, pulling out his phone. "You're legally unfit. I'm calling hospital security right now to have you dragged out of here in handcuffs." "You can try." Dr. Aris's voice rang out coolly from the hallway behind him. She walked in holding a stack of medical tablets. "But I will personally inform the police that she is here by my direct medical authorization. This is a matter of life and death, Mr. Sterling. The family court order is currently suspended." Robert's jaw twitched. He hated losing control. He hated being told no. "Fine," Robert snapped, adjusting his expensive tie. "But I call the shots regarding her treatment. I'm her sole guardian." "Actually, right now, biology calls the shots," Dr. Aris said flatly, ignoring his posturing. She looked between Robert, me, and the terrified Chloe in the corner. "We don't have time for family politics. Emma's bone marrow is failing. I need blood samples from all three of you right now. We are running rapid HLA tissue typing and a full DNA genetic panel to confirm parentage and donor compatibility. The lab is waiting." None of us knew it yet, but that single routine DNA test was about to detonate a bomb that would destroy Robert's entire empire of lies. The phlebotomist was a young guy in blue scrubs who tried his best to keep a steady hand while drawing my blood, but the tension in room 412 was thick enough to choke on. I sat in the chair next to Emma's bed, a cotton ball taped to the crook of my elbow. Across the room, Robert was rolling down his monogrammed cuffs after his own blood draw. He was already back on his phone, furiously typing out an email. He didn't look at Emma. He didn't look at Chloe. He just played the part of the highly important, aggressively busy Seattle lawyer who was severely inconvenienced by his child's oncology crisis. But it was Chloe who commanded all of my attention. As an auditor, my brain is hardwired to process anomalies. It's what I do for a living. I look at a spreadsheet and instantly spot the numbers that don't belong. Looking at my 10-year-old daughter, every single alarm bell in my head was screaming. Chloe was sitting on a small vinyl couch, her knees pulled tight to her chest in a defensive fetal position. She was wearing a faded graphic tee that hung off her collarbones like a sack. I roughly estimated her weight. She couldn't have been more than 60 pounds. For a 10-year-old girl, that was severely underweight. But it wasn't just her physical frailty, it was her eyes. They darted constantly between Robert and the door. Whenever Robert shifted his weight or cleared his throat, Chloe visibly flinched. This wasn't just a child going through a stressful hospital visit. This was a child who lived in a state of perpetual, hyper-vigilant terror. "I'm going to grab a coffee," Robert announced to the room, not waiting for an answer. As he walked past Chloe, he snapped, "Sit up straight, Chloe. Stop slouching. You look ridiculous." Chloe instantly snapped her spine straight, her eyes dropping to the floor. "Yes, Daddy. I'm sorry." My blood boiled. I stood up, kissing Emma's sweaty forehead. "I'll be right back, sweetie. I promise." I followed Robert out into the brightly lit hallway. He was halfway to the elevators when I caught up to him, grabbing the sleeve of his tailored suit. "Don't you ever speak to her like that again," I hissed, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't carry back to the room. Robert yanked his arm away, brushing off his sleeve like I had infected him. He let out a condescending laugh. "Or what, Sarah? You'll write me a sternly worded email? Newsflash. I have sole legal and physical custody. I call the shots. You're only here right now because some bleeding heart doctor overstepped her bounds. The second Emma is out of the woods, I'm having you slapped with a permanent injunction. You're on thin ice." "Cut the crap, Robert," I fired back, stepping into his space. I wasn't the broken, weeping woman he had steamrolled in family court 2 years ago. "Look at Chloe. She's practically skin and bones. She's terrified of her own shadow. What the hell have you been doing to my girls behind closed doors?" His eyes narrowed into dark, hateful slits. "I have been providing for them. I pay for their private school. I put a roof over their heads while their mother lost her mind. You're the unstable one, remember? Dr. Strauss put it all in writing for the judge." "Doctor, Strauss was a bought and paid for hack, and you know it," I retorted, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and adrenaline. "I'm not playing your gaslighting games anymore, Robert. Emma has leukemia. She is fighting for her life. For once in your miserable, narcissistic existence, put someone else first." Before Robert could spit out a reply, Dr. Aris stepped out of a nearby lab door. She held a digital tablet tight against her chest, her expression completely unreadable. "Sarah, Mr. Sterling, in my office. Now." We followed her in silence. The consultation room was small, windowless, and smelled faintly of bleach and stale coffee. Dr. Aris sat behind her desk, gesturing for us to take the 2 chairs opposite her. Robert sat down, crossing his ankle over his knee, looking supremely put out. I perched on the edge of my seat, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The lab put a rush on the rapid HLA tissue typing and the full genetic panel, Doctor. Eris began, folding her hands over her tablet. In pediatric leukemia cases, time is our biggest enemy. We need to establish a bone marrow match as fast as humanly possible. So? Robert demanded, tapping his expensive leather shoe against the linoleum floor. Which one of us is the match? I have a trial starting next week, so if it's me, we need to schedule the harvest procedure immediately. Dr. Eris looked at him, her face completely still. Neither of you is a match for Emma, and Chloe is not a match either. A heavy, suffocating silence dropped over the room. What do you mean no one is a match? I choked out, the reality of the words settling like lead in my stomach. I thought parents were an automatic half match. I thought Chloe had a 25% chance of being a perfect match. Normally, yes, Dr. Eris said softly. She turned her gaze to me, her eyes filled with a heavy, profound sympathy that made the hairs on my arm stand up. Sarah, biology usually follows a strict set of rules. A child inherits half their HLA markers from their mother and half from their father. We ran the DNA panel twice to confirm because the results were highly unusual. Just spit it out, doctor, Robert snapped, losing his patience. Stop talking in circles. Dr. Eris turned the tablet around and slid it across the desk toward us. The screen displayed a complex array of genetic markers, bar graphs, and percentages. The mitochondrial DNA confirms that you, Sarah, are the biological mother of both Emma and Chloe, Dr. Eris explained, pointing to the screen. However, the paternal markers tell a different story. Mr. Sterling, you are a confirmed half-match to Chloe. You are her biological father. Robert scoffed. Obviously. But, Dr. Eris continued, her voice dropping an octave, you share absolutely zero paternal genetic markers with Emma. You are not Emma's biological father. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning vent above us. Robert stared at the tablet, his brow furrowing as his lawyer brain struggled to process the words. That's impossible. They're twins. They were born on the exact same day. What kind of incompetent lab are you running here? It's a phenomenon called heteropaternal superfecundation, Dr. Eris said, her tone clinical and steady. It is extremely rare, but it happens. It occurs when a woman releases 2 eggs during the same ovulation cycle, and she has intimate contact with 2 different men within a short window, usually 24 to 48 hours. The eggs are fertilized by sperm from 2 different individuals. Emma and Chloe are fraternal twins, but genetically they are half-sisters. I couldn't breathe. I literally forgot how to draw oxygen into my lungs. 2 eggs, 2 fathers. Robert's head snapped toward me. The arrogant smirk was completely gone, replaced by a terrifying primal rage. The color drained from his face, leaving him a mottled, ashen red. You, Robert breathed, his voice trembling with fury. He stood up so fast his chair crashed to the floor. You lying, cheating whore. Robert, no, I gasped, shrinking back in my seat. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. My mind instantly, violently ripped itself backward through time. 11 years ago. June 2014. The memories hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Robert and I had been engaged. We had gotten into a screaming, glass-shattering fight about his controlling behavior, how he tried to dictate what I wore, who I saw, where I worked. I had packed a suitcase, thrown my ring on the kitchen counter, and checked into a downtown hotel, fully intending to leave him for good. That night, at the hotel bar, I ran into David Carter, my college sweetheart, a brilliant, soft-spoken architect who had always treated me with nothing but kindness. We had broken up years prior because our careers were pulling us to different coasts, but seeing him that night, it was like finding a safe harbor in the middle of a hurricane. 1 drink turned into 3. We went up to his room. It was an act of desperation, of seeking comfort and validation from a man who had actually loved me correctly. But the next morning, the guilt and the fear set in. Robert flooded my phone with apologies. He sent flowers. He showed up at the hotel lobby in tears, begging for one last chance, swearing he would go to therapy, swearing he would change. Like a fool, I believed him. I went back. I put the ring back on. 2 weeks later, I missed my period. When the ultrasound showed twins, Robert was ecstatic. I had convinced myself entirely, completely, that both babies were his. It was the only mathematically logical conclusion in my head. I had buried that one night with David so deep in my subconscious that it felt like a dream. "You played me for a fool for 10 years!" Robert screamed, slamming his hands down on Dr. Eris's desk, rattling her pen cup. "You passed off some bastard child as my own. I paid for her. I raised her." "Mr. Sterling, you need to lower your voice immediately or I will have security remove you," Dr. Eris ordered, standing up. "I didn't know, Robert," I cried, tears hot and fast on my cheeks. "I thought they were both yours. I never would have lied about this." "Save your bullshit, Sarah," Robert spat, pointing a shaking finger an inch from my face. "You think you've seen me play hardball in court? You haven't seen anything yet. I am going to destroy you. I am going to take Chloe, and I am going to make sure you never, ever see the light of day again. You are done." He turned on his heel and stormed out of the office, slamming the heavy wooden door so hard the hinges groaned. I buried my face in my hands, sobbing violently. My entire world had just detonated. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. My marriage had been built on a biological time bomb, and it had just exploded in the middle of a pediatric oncology ward. Dr. Eris walked around her desk and placed a gentle, grounding hand on my shaking shoulder. "Sarah," she said softly, "look at me." I dragged my head up, my vision blurred with tears. "I know this is a massive, life-altering shock," Dr. Eris said, her voice anchoring me back to the present reality. "And I know your ex-husband is going to use this to declare war, but right now, none of that matters. Emma's white blood cell count is plummeting. She does not have the luxury of time." She grabbed a notepad and a pen, sliding them across the desk toward me. "If Robert is not the father, we have 0 genetic matches in our current pool. The National Bone Marrow Registry could take months to find an unrelated match. Emma doesn't have months. She might not even have weeks." Dr. Eris tapped the pen against the paper. "Sarah, who is the other man?" I stared at the blank piece of paper. The weight of the past 11 years pressed down on my shoulders. If I wrote his name down, I was inviting a ghost back into my life. I was about to drop a nuclear bomb on a man who had no idea he was a father. But then I thought of Emma, lying in that bed, her skin gray, fighting a monster inside her own blood. I picked up the pen. My hand shook as I wrote down a name I hadn't spoken out loud in over a decade. "His name is David," I whispered, the ink smudging under a fallen tear. "David Carter. He's an architect here in Seattle. He's her father." Dr. Eris took the paper, her eyes grim but determined. "Find him, Sarah. Call him today, because if he doesn't walk through those hospital doors and offer his marrow, we are going to lose her." The hospital chapel was tucked away on the second floor, a small windowless room that smelled of floor wax and old paper. It was completely empty, save for rows of generic wooden chairs and a single flickering electric candle. I sat in the back row, my phone clutched in my trembling hands. Finding David Carter's number hadn't been hard. As a forensic auditor, I could track a shell corporation through 3 different countries. Googling a prominent Seattle architect took less than 30 seconds. My screen glowed with the contact info for Carter and Hayes Architecture. I stared at the 10 digits. My thumb hovered over the green call button. 11 years. I hadn't spoken a single word to this man in 11 years. The last time I saw him, I had slipped out of his hotel room before dawn, drowning in guilt, rushing back to a toxic fiancé who would spend the next decade systematically destroying my self-worth. How do you casually drop a nuclear bomb on someone's Tuesday afternoon? "Hey, remember that one night in 2014? Surprise. You have a 10-year-old daughter, she's dying of leukemia, and her sociopathic legal father just disowned her. Can you swing by the hospital?" I squeezed my eyes shut, a tear slipping down my cheek. I pictured Emma in that ICU bed, her skin gray, her life fading into a terrifyingly fragile flatline. I hit call. It rang 3 times. Every ring felt like a physical blow to my chest. "David Carter speaking?" His voice was exactly the same, deep, steady, carrying that same calm resonance that had once made me feel so incredibly safe. "David?" I croaked out. My throat was so tight I sounded like a stranger. It's Sarah Jenkins." A heavy, stunned silence fell over the line. I could hear the faint sound of drafting paper rustling in the background, and then a sharp exhale. "Sarah? Wow, This is out of left field. Are you okay? Hearing the genuine concern in his voice, after just being screamed at and discarded by Robert, completely broke me. A sob tore from my throat. Sarah, hey, what's wrong? The rustling stopped entirely. Where are you? I'm at Seattle Children's Hospital, I choked out, pressing my free hand over my mouth to muffle my crying. David, I am so sorry. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know until an hour ago. Didn't know what? Sarah, take a breath. Talk to me. I have twin daughters. They're 10, I said, the words tumbling out in a panicked rush. But today, we found out one of them has acute myeloid leukemia. She needs a bone marrow transplant to survive. They ran genetic tests on the whole family to find a match. I paused, my lungs burning. David, they found out my twins have 2 different fathers. It's a rare biological anomaly. My ex-husband isn't her dad. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the hum of the chapel's ventilation system. David, her name is Emma, I whispered, the tears falling freely now. She is 10 years old. She is the sweetest, smartest little girl in the world, and she is dying. And she's yours. You are her biological father. I braced myself for the anger. I braced myself for the accusations, the denial, the demand for lawyers. I had just upended his entire reality. Instead, I heard the sound of keys jingling. What room are you in? David asked, his voice stripped of all shock, replaced entirely by an ironclad resolve. Room 412, pediatric ICU. I'm 10 minutes away. I'm on my way. 45 minutes later, I was pacing the hallway outside the ICU when the elevator doors slid open. David stepped out. At 38, he looked older, of course. There was a dusting of silver at his temples, and the lines around his hazel eyes were deeper, but he still possessed that quiet, grounded strength. He was wearing a dark button-down shirt and slacks, his jacket thrown casually over one arm. He spotted me immediately. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight up to me, bypassing the awkwardness of an 11-year gap, and pulled me into a firm, grounding hug. I completely fell apart against his chest, gripping his shirt like a drowning woman. I've got you, he murmured into my hair. It's going to be okay. Where's the doctor? Dr. Aris appeared from the nurse's station, eyeing David with a mix of professional scrutiny and relief. You must be Mr. Carter. I am, David said, pulling back to shake her hand. Whatever you need, blood, marrow, whatever. Just tell me where to go. They didn't waste a single second. Within 10 minutes, David was in a phlebotomy chair with a needle in his arm. They rushed his blood to the lab for the rapid HLA typing. The wait was agonizing. For 3 hours, David and I sat side by side in the waiting room. I told him everything. I told him about the divorce, about Robert's psychological warfare, about the fake psychiatric evaluation that had stolen my girls from me for 2 years. David just listened. He didn't judge me for going back to Robert back in 2014. He just handed me tissues and radiated a quiet, furious empathy. At 4 p.m., Dr. Aris walked in, her tablet in hand. She looked exhausted, but for the first time all day, there was a glimmer of light in her eyes. We have a match, Dr. Aris announced. Mr. Carter, you are a haploidentical match. As her biological father, you share 50% of her genetic markers, which is standard and highly viable for a transplant using our newer protocols. David blew out a massive breath, running a hand over his face. Thank God. When do we do it? Emma needs to undergo aggressive conditioning chemotherapy first to completely wipe out her diseased bone marrow, Dr. Aris explained. We start that tonight. It will take a few days. If she stabilizes through the chemo, we harvest your marrow and perform the transplant on Friday. Those next 3 days were a descent into a specialized kind of hell. I sat by Emma's bed, watching the toxic, life-saving chemicals drip into her small veins. Her hair began to thin. Her skin became so fragile it looked like tissue paper. Because Robert had practically abandoned the hospital to go handle his business, I was allowed to stay by her side, completely ignoring the family court restraining order. David was a constant, steady presence. He didn't push. He didn't demand to be called Dad. He just sat on the other side of the bed, reading Harry Potter out loud to a sleeping Emma, his voice a soothing, rhythmic anchor in the sterile room. Then came Thursday morning, the day before the transplant. I was reviewing a client's tax file on my laptop, trying to keep my brain occupied, when Emma suddenly gasped. It wasn't a normal breath. It was a sharp, wet, rattling sound. Her back arched off the mattress. I dropped my laptop. It hit the linoleum floor with a loud crack. Emma? Emma, honey, look at Mommy. Her eyes rolled back into her head, and then the monitors above her bed didn't just beep, they screamed. A shrill, continuous, piercing alarm that froze the blood in my veins. The numbers on the screen plummeted. Her oxygen levels dropped into the 70s. Her heart rate was crashing. Code blue, pediatric ICU, room 412. The overhead PA system blared, the voice echoing down the hallway. Help! I screamed, lunging for the call button, but I didn't need to. The door flew open and a team of doctors and nurses flooded the room like a tidal wave. Dr. Aris was at the front. She's in septic shock. Heart rate is 40 and dropping, a nurse yelled, grabbing a crash cart from the hallway. Push 0.5 of epinephrine. Stat, start bagging her, Dr. Aris commanded, leaping onto a step stool beside the bed. Someone grabbed my arms from behind. It was a burly male nurse. Mom, you need to step out. You have to step into the hallway right now. No, please, Emma, I shrieked, fighting against his grip as he physically dragged me out of the room. I watched in absolute, visceral horror as Dr. Aris placed her hands over my 10-year-old daughter's fragile chest and began doing chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come on, Emma, stay with us, Dr. Aris yelled over the chaos. I collapsed against the wall in the hallway, my legs giving out completely. I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled into a dark, terrifying pinpoint. My daughter was dying right in front of me. After 2 years of being separated from her, I was going to lose her forever. Suddenly, a pair of strong arms wrapped around me, pulling me up from the cold floor. It was David. He had just arrived from his pre-op appointment. He pulled me into his chest, wrapping his arms around my head, shielding me from the sight of the doctors fighting for our daughter's life. Don't look, Sarah. Look at me, David ordered, his voice thick with his own terror, but steady enough to hold me up. Look right at me. They're losing her, David, I sobbed hysterically, clawing at his shirt. She's dying. She is not dying, David said fiercely, his eyes locking onto mine, refusing to let me spiral into the abyss. She is your daughter. She is a fighter. She is going to pull through this. Breathe with me, Sarah. Come on, breathe. For 10 excruciating, agonizing minutes, the chaos inside room 412 continued. The sound of the defibrillator charging, the sharp clear, the sickening thud of the shock, and then the flatline tone broke. It turned into a slow, erratic beep, 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 beep. Dr. Aris stepped out of the room, her surgical cap askew, sweat beading on her forehead. She stripped off her gloves, her hands shaking slightly. We got her back, Dr. Aris panted, leaning against the doorframe. She developed a sudden, severe blood infection. The chemo wiped out her immune system completely. We've intubated her and put her on broad-spectrum IV antibiotics. I slumped against David, letting out a ragged, ugly sob of relief. Is she going to make it? Dr. Aris looked at David. Her marrow is entirely gone. We cannot wait until tomorrow. If we don't do the transplant today, right now, she will not survive the night. Mr. Carter, are you ready? David didn't even blink. He let go of me, pressing a quick, fierce kiss to my forehead. Take everything you need, David said to the doctor. Save my little girl. As they wheeled David away to the OR for the marrow harvest, I looked through the glass window into Emma's room. She was hooked up to a ventilator, a web of tubes keeping her tethered to the living world. She was fighting. David was fighting. But where was Robert? Where was the man who had legally claimed he was the only fit parent for these children? My analytical brain kicked in. I wiped my tears, my grief slowly hardening into a cold, calculated fury. I didn't know it yet, but while my daughter was flatlining in the ICU, Robert Sterling was busy orchestrating one of the most disgusting financial frauds I had ever seen, and I was an auditor. I was about to follow the money straight to his throat. People think a bone marrow transplant looks like open heart surgery. They picture scalpels, bright lights, and a team of surgeons huddled over an open chest cavity. But for the recipient, it's actually anticlimactic. It's just a bag of fluid. I sat beside Emma's bed in the pediatric ICU, holding my breath as Dr. Aris hooked a specialized IV bag to my daughter's central line. Inside the bag was a thick, pinkish-red liquid. It was David's marrow, his stem cells. His literal life force, harvested from his hip bones just hours prior, now slowly dripping into Emma's bloodstream. The infusion will take about 2 hours, Dr. Aris murmured, adjusting the drip rate. Now comes the hardest part, Sarah. We wait. It usually takes 10 to 14 days for the donor stem cells to migrate to the bone marrow cavities and start producing healthy new blood cells. We call it engraftment. If her white blood cell count starts ticking up, we'll know David's marrow took hold. And if it doesn't? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Dr. Aris met my eyes. Let's focus on day by day. She survived the septic shock. That proves she has a tremendous will to live. I nodded, my eyes glued to the steady drip, drip, drip of the IV. Down the hall in the surgical recovery ward, David was laid up, sore and exhausted from the extraction procedure. He had literally given a piece of himself to save a child he hadn't even known existed until yesterday. And Robert, the man who had legally sworn he was the only capable parent, he was nowhere to be found. He had vanished right after the explosive DNA revelation, claiming he had an emergency deposition to prep for. With Emma heavily sedated and stable for the moment, my maternal radar violently shifted to the other half of my heart. I turned around. Chloe was curled up in the uncomfortable vinyl recliner in the corner of the room. She was practically vibrating with anxiety, her knees tucked under her chin. When I looked closer, my breath hitched. She was clutching a handful of generic plastic-wrapped saltine crackers she had swiped from the nurse's station. But she wasn't eating them. She was stuffing them into the pockets of her oversized hoodie, her movements frantic and secretive, like a stray animal terrified of being caught. "Chloe, sweetie," I said softly, standing up and taking a slow, non-threatening step toward her. Chloe flinched, her hands freezing over her pockets. Her dark eyes, so much like my own, darted toward the hallway. "I'm sorry, I won't make a mess. Please don't tell Daddy." My heart shattered into a million jagged pieces. I knelt in front of her chair, keeping my distance so I wouldn't crowd her. "I'm not going to tell anyone, baby. You can have all the crackers you want. Are you hungry? I can go down to the cafeteria and get you a real meal. Mac and cheese? A burger?" Chloe shook her head rapidly, her eyes wide with a conditioned, deeply ingrained terror. No, Daddy says I have to earn my dinners. I haven't been good today." I cried. Crying means I lose my meal privileges. The room spun. A cold, suffocating wave of nausea washed over me. "Earn your dinners?" I repeated, my voice trembling despite my desperate attempt to keep it level. "Chloe, how often does your dad make you skip dinner?" Chloe looked down at her frayed sneakers, her tiny shoulders slumping. "When I'm bad, or when I ask about you. He said, you left us because we were too much trouble. He said if I brought you up, it meant I wasn't grateful for him, and ungrateful kids don't get to eat." She sniffled, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "I've been trying to be good, Mommy. I swear. But sometimes my tummy hurts so bad I can't sleep. That's why I hide the crackers. Just in case." A white-hot, blinding rage ignited in my chest. It wasn't just anger, it was an inferno. Robert hadn't just legally stolen my children. He had systematically tortured them. He had used food restriction as a weapon of psychological warfare. It was classic textbook coercive control, the kind of invisible abuse that leaves no bruises for school teachers to report but completely destroys a child from the inside out. I gently reached out and cupped her sunken, hollow cheek. "Chloe, look at me. You are never, ever going to go hungry again. Do you understand me? What your father did was wrong. It was cruel, and it is over. You will never have to earn a meal for the rest of your life." I stood up, my blood roaring in my ears. I needed to find Dr. Aris. I needed this documented. I needed Chloe's weight, her BMI, and her vitamin levels on the official hospital record immediately. I stepped out of the ICU, scanning the busy corridor. The nurses were swarming around a medication cart, so I walked down the hall toward the family waiting lounge, hoping to find the attending pediatric social worker. As I approached the lounge, the heavy oak door was slightly ajar. From inside, I heard a voice, smooth, baritone, perfectly modulated for maximum sympathy. "Robert." I froze, pressing my back against the wall, peering through the crack in the door. Robert wasn't at his law firm. He was standing in the corner of the private family lounge. He had taken off his expensive suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, perfectly disheveling his hair to look like the exhausted, frantic father. He had his iPhone propped up on a stack of magazines, an LED ring light clipped to the top of it. He was live streaming. It's just been the hardest week of my life," Robert said to the camera, his voice cracking with a masterfully executed tremor. He actually rubbed a hand over his eyes, squeezing out a single, perfectly timed crocodile tear. "Being a single dad is already a challenge, but watching my little girl, my Emma, fight this aggressive leukemia, It breaks a father's heart. I haven't slept in days. I haven't left this hospital. I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. He hasn't left the hospital? He wasn't even in the room when she flatlined. He hadn't held her hand once. The medical bills are already piling up, Robert continued, looking deeply into the camera lens with a look of manufactured devastation. The out-of-pocket cost for the chemotherapy, the specialized ICU care, the marrow transplant, it's astronomical. I pride myself on providing for my girls, but this is burying us. That's why I've set up the Emma's Fight GoFundMe campaign. Every dollar helps me keep the lights on so I can stay by her bedside. My auditor brain, momentarily sidelined by maternal grief, suddenly slammed into high gear. Out-of-pocket costs? Robert was a senior partner at a top-tier corporate real estate firm in downtown Seattle. His firm provided platinum-level PPO health insurance. I knew this for a fact because I had audited his personal finances during our brutal divorce. His insurance covered 100% of pediatric oncology care. There were virtually zero out-of-pocket medical expenses for Emma's treatment. He was lying. He was running a massive public con monetizing our daughter's cancer. Thank you to everyone who has already donated, Robert said, his voice dripping with faux humility. The link is pinned in the comments. Please keep my girls in your prayers. He reached forward and tapped the screen to end the live stream. The second the recording stopped, the fake weeping father vanished completely. Robert immediately straightened his posture, rolling his shoulders and checking his reflection in his phone screen to fix his hair. He swiped open an app, likely the GoFundMe dashboard, and a disgusting, arrogant smirk spread across his face. Idiots, he muttered under his breath, chuckling as he typed something into his phone. He tossed his phone onto the coffee table and turned around to grab a cup of coffee from the courtesy machine in the corner. In that split second, my eyes darted to his open leather briefcase sitting on one of the lounge chairs. Sticking out of the side pocket was a stack of freshly printed bank statements and a sleek black leather ledger. Robert was old school. He liked his narcissism documented in hard copy. He always kept a ledger of his wins. I didn't think. I just moved. Channeling every ounce of stealth I possessed, I pushed the door open an inch wider, slipped my phone out of my pocket, and zoomed the camera lens in as far as it would go. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to hold my breath, stabilizing the shot. Click. I took 3 rapid, high-resolution photos of the papers sticking out of the briefcase. The top page was a wire transfer confirmation. I couldn't read the fine print from this distance, but I could clearly see the routing number, the account name, Sterling Holdings LLC, and a massive 6-figure sum. I slipped back out into the hallway just as Robert turned around with his coffee. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it was going to crack my ribs. I leaned against the cold hospital wall, pulling up the photos in my camera roll. I pinched the screen, zooming in on the routing number. It was an offshore account, Cayman Islands, and the transfer date was from 2 days ago. He's siphoning the charity money, I realized, a cold, sharp clarity washing over me. He wasn't just hoarding the GoFundMe cash. He was actively laundering it through a shell company to hide it from the IRS and the family court. Sarah? I jumped, nearly dropping my phone. Jess was standing at the end of the hallway, holding a massive tote bag stuffed with clothes, toiletries, and a stack of manila folders from the office. Jess, I breathed, rushing over to her. I brought you some clean clothes and your audit software hard drives just in case you needed a distraction, she said, eyeing my pale face. What happened? You look like you just saw a ghost. Worse, I whispered, grabbing her arm and pulling her into an empty alcove near the vending machines. I just saw a monster. I showed her the photos on my phone. I told her about Chloe hoarding crackers. I told her about Robert's sickening, Oscar-worthy performance on Facebook Live, soliciting donations for bills he didn't even have. Jess's jaw dropped. That son of a bitch. He's using a dying 10-year-old to line his own pockets. Sarah, this is wire fraud. This is a federal crime. I know, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. For 2 years, he told the world I was crazy. He used his law degree and his connections to bully me into submission. But he just made a fatal mistake, Jess. What's that? He left a financial paper trail, I said, staring at the routing number on my screen. The grief and terror of the past 72 hours were still there, but they were being rapidly eclipsed by the meticulous, relentless focus of a forensic auditor who had just found her target. Robert thought he had won. He thought he had broken me, but he forgot what I did for a living. I was going to tear his finances apart dollar by bloody dollar, and I was going to burn his entire empire to the ground. Numbers are the only language that have never betrayed me. They don't gaslight you. They don't tell you that you're crazy or unstable or unfit to be a mother. When you line them up in a ledger, they tell a pristine, indisputable story. I sat at a sticky, laminated table in the back corner of the hospital cafeteria, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like an angry hornet. Jess sat across from me, acting as a human shield against the sparse, late-night hospital crowd. She had brought my heavy-duty encrypted work laptop, the one loaded with all of our firm's forensic auditing software, and I booted up the deep background tracking software we use at the firm to hunt down hidden corporate assets. "All right," Jess whispered, sliding a lukewarm cup of black coffee across the table. I hooked us up to the firm's secure VPN. If Robert has any kind of alert set up on his accounts, he won't be able to trace the IP address back to Seattle Children's. "What's the play, Sarah?" I cracked my knuckles, my eyes locked on the glowing screen. The blinding, hysterical panic I'd felt during Emma's code blue had evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hyper-focused glacier of pure rage. "The play is that Robert is a textbook narcissist," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I booted up the databases. "And narcissists always make the same fatal mistake. They think they're the smartest person in the room. They get sloppy. He's running a public GoFundMe campaign called Emma's Fight, claiming he's drowning in out-of-pocket medical bills." "Which is a load of crap," Jess scoffed. "His law firm has a platinum PPO plan. I remember looking at his benefits package during your divorce discovery. It covers 100% of pediatric catastrophic illness." "Exactly," I said, pulling up the GoFundMe page. My stomach churned as the page loaded. There was a giant, high-resolution photo of Emma sleeping in her ICU bed, tubes snaking across her pale face. Robert had monetized my daughter's suffering. Below the photo, the donation tracker glowed in bright green, $185,400 raised of $250,000 goal. Over 2,000 people had donated, strangers leaving comments like, "Praying for your sweet angel, Robert. You're such a strong single dad." "Makes you want to throw up, doesn't it?" Jess muttered in disgust. "I don't want to throw up. I want to put him in federal prison," I replied, my voice deadpan. I pulled up the photos I had snapped of his briefcase in the family lounge. I zoomed in on the wire transfer confirmation slip. "Okay, look at this. The beneficiary account is listed under Sterling Holdings, LLC. The routing number belongs to an offshore bank based in the Cayman Islands." "He set up a shell company to wash the charity money?" Jess asked, leaning in closer. "That's federal wire fraud, Sarah." "It gets better," I said, opening up our LexisNexis database, a public records research tool we use to skip trace assets for corporate audits. I punched in Sterling Holdings, LLC. Let's see who the registered agent is. The progress bar spun for a few agonizing seconds before spitting out a dense, text-heavy document. I skimmed past the legal jargon, my eyes darting straight to the signatory lines. "Bingo," I whispered. The LLC was registered in Delaware, a classic move for hiding assets, but the managing director was listed under a secondary corporate entity that eventually linked right back to a P.O. box in downtown Seattle. A P.O. box I instantly recognized. It was the same one Robert used to route his private country club bills so I wouldn't see them when we were married. He's funneling the GoFundMe payouts into his personal checking account, taking a cut, and wiring the bulk of it offshore, I explained, piecing the puzzle together in real time. But here's the thing about Robert. He has a massive ego, and he has a gambling problem. He hides it well, but he used to blow thousands on offshore sports betting when we were together. I opened up a secondary tab, running a deep web trace on public transactions linked to his primary email address, the one he arrogantly used for everything because he thought he was untouchable. "Sarah, look," Jess pointed at the screen. "That's Venmo, his public transaction history." I scrolled down. Robert had his privacy settings locked down for the big stuff, but he had left his Venmo and secondary social media footprints wide open. I cross-referenced the dates of the massive GoFundMe payouts with his digital footprint over the last 3 weeks. "Look at this," I said, my blood running cold. August 20th. GoFundMe pays out $40,000. 2 days later, Robert's email is flagged in a data leak for a high-stakes offshore betting syndicate called Bovada. He's paying off bookies, Jess, with money meant to save our daughter. My God, Jess breathed. He's an absolute sociopath. Wait, there's more. Look at this transaction from last Tuesday, just 2 days before Emma flatlined. I pointed to a digital receipt trace linked to a high-end boutique, $25,000 at Cascade Fine Jewelers. Jess frowned. Jewelry? Who the hell is he buying diamonds for while his kid is on life support? I used my skip tracing tool to pull up the most frequently contacted individuals linked to his recent public records. A name popped up at the top of the list, Amanda Cole. Let's check the gram, Jess said, already pulling out her iPhone and typing the name into Instagram. Amanda Cole. Seattle. Got her. Jess slid her phone across the table. Amanda Cole was 26, gorgeous, and clearly living her best life. Her Instagram feed was a curated grid of luxury dinners, spa days, and designer shopping bags. But it was the most recent post that made the bile rise in my throat. It was a photo of Amanda sitting in the passenger seat of Robert's Porsche. Her manicured hand was resting on the dashboard, showing off a blinding, thick diamond tennis bracelet. The caption read, "Spoiled by the absolute best guy ever. He works so hard, but he always makes time for his queen. Hashtag, blessed hashtag, Seattle life." The timestamp? Yesterday afternoon. Right around the time David was having his hip bones drilled into to extract the marrow that would save Emma's life. He bought his mistress a $25,000 bracelet using cancer charity money, Jess said, her voice shaking with a mix of awe and sheer revulsion. Sarah, if you take this to a judge, they won't just reverse the custody order. They'll lock him up and throw away the key. I closed my laptop with a quiet, definitive snap. I don't have enough to get a subpoena just yet, I said, my mind already 10 steps ahead. I have a profile of fraud. I have photos of a briefcase and public social media posts. Any decent defense attorney will say it's circumstantial, or that I illegally accessed the data out of spite. So, what do we do? We need a legal shark, I said, packing the laptop into its padded case. Someone who specializes in family law but knows how to prosecute financial abuse. And I need to talk to Amanda Cole. Jess's eyes went wide. You want to confront the mistress? I don't want to confront her. I want to flip her, I said, sliding the strap of the bag over my shoulder. Robert is a user. He uses people until they have nothing left and then he discards them. If he's hiding assets, she might have access to his home office or his unsecured devices. But first, I need to get back to my girls. We left the cafeteria and took the elevator back up to the pediatric ICU. The sterile smell of alcohol wipes and iodine hit me as soon as the doors opened, instantly snapping me out of my auditor headspace and pulling me back into my reality as a mother. I walked quietly down the hall and peered through the glass window of room 412. The scene inside made my breath catch in my throat. Emma was fast asleep, the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest synced with the ventilator. The bag of David's stem cells had finished infusing, but it was the corner of the room that brought hot, prickling tears to my eyes. David was sitting cross-legged on the cold linoleum floor. Chloe was sitting about 2 feet away from him, her knees still pulled to her chest, but she wasn't hiding in the corner anymore. David had a large sketch pad resting on his lap, and he was drawing a cartoonish, intricate castle with a charcoal pencil. He was speaking to her in a low, gentle rumble, his voice carrying no demands, no expectations. Just quiet, steady warmth. So, if you were a princess, David murmured, adding a turret to the drawing, would you want a moat with alligators or a moat with really angry ducks? Because honestly, ducks can be pretty terrifying if you don't have bread. Chloe hesitated. She looked at the door, her conditioned fear still very present. But then, she looked back at the drawing. A tiny, fragile ghost of a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Ducks, Chloe whispered. Ducks with swords. David chuckled softly, a warm, genuine sound. Ducks with swords. I love it. A brilliant tactical defense. He reached over to a small side table and picked up half of a turkey sandwich wrapped in foil. He didn't hand it to her directly. He knew she was skittish. He just placed it on a napkin halfway between them. I'm going to leave this right here, David said casually, going back to his shading. I bought it downstairs, but I'm absolutely stuffed. If you want to do me a favor and get rid of it so the nurses don't yell at me, I'd appreciate it. I watched, my heart hammering against my ribs as Chloe slowly reached out a trembling hand. She picked up the sandwich. She didn't stuff it in her pocket. She didn't look around to see if she was going to be punished. She took a bite. And then another. I pressed my hand against the glass, the tears flowing freely down my face. This is what a father looked like. David didn't share a single drop of DNA with Chloe. He had known her for exactly 4 days. Yet, he was treating her with more humanity, more dignity, and more pure parental love than Robert had in 10 years. Jess stepped up beside me, looking through the glass. She let out a soft sigh. "He's a good man, Sarah." "He is," I whispered, wiping my cheeks. "He's saving them. Both of them." I turned away from the window, the image of Chloe eating that sandwich cementing the titanium resolve in my spine. Robert Sterling had taken 2 years of their childhood. He had starved one daughter for control and used the other's terminal illness for profit. "You said you knew a lawyer," I said to Jess, my voice entirely void of fear. "A shark." Jess nodded slowly. "Evelyn Vance. She's the most ruthless family law attorney in King County. She used to be a federal prosecutor for white-collar crime. If you want to nail Robert for the money and the abuse, Evelyn is your executioner." "Call her," I said. "Tell her I want to hire her. Tell her I'm going to burn Robert Sterling's life to the ground, and I have the matches right here in my pocket." Evelyn Vance did not have a cozy office. There were no plush velvet couches or soothing pastel paintings meant to calm distressed divorcees. Her office, perched on the 32nd floor of a sleek glass high-rise in downtown Seattle, felt like a war room. It smelled of expensive espresso and intimidation. Evelyn herself was in her late 50s with sharp, silver-streaked hair cut into a severe bob and a gaze that could peel the paint off a wall. She was a former federal prosecutor who had pivoted to high-stakes family law, earning a reputation for financially gutting wealthy, abusive men. "I don't do hand-holding, Sarah," Evelyn said, leaning back in her leather chair and fixing me with a predatory stare. She had just finished reviewing the dossier Jess and I had compiled over the last 48 hours. The DNA test results, the hospital records of Chloe's severe malnourishment, and the photos of Robert's offshore wire transfers. "I don't need hand-holding," I replied, sitting dead straight in the chair opposite her, my own hands folded neatly in my lap. "I need you to drop the hammer on him." Evelyn's lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. She liked that. She tapped a manicured fingernail against the dossier. "What you have here is a highly compelling narrative. The DNA revelation is a wild card. Family court judges despise paternity fraud, but because you genuinely didn't know and because Robert has been the established legal father for 10 years, it's muddy. The starvation of Chloe, however, that is criminal abuse. If Dr. Aris testifies, we can get an emergency ex parte order to strip his custody." "But?" Jess asked from the chair next to me, sensing the pivot. "But," Evelyn continued, her eyes narrowing, "Robert Sterling is a senior partner at a massive real estate firm. He knows the judges. He plays golf with the mediators. He will absolutely claim that Chloe is just a picky eater and find a rent-a-doc to back him up. He will claim you illegally hacked his briefcase for these photos. If we go into court half-cocked, he will tie us up in litigation for years while those girls stay in his house." My stomach tightened, but my voice remained steady. "So how do we bypass family court politics?" "We don't just take his kids, we take his freedom," Evelyn said smoothly. "Wire fraud, embezzlement from a charitable fund, money laundering, those are federal felonies. If we hand the FBI a silver platter indictment, Robert won't be fighting for custody. He'll be fighting to stay out of a federal penitentiary. But to do that, I need more than photos of a briefcase. I need the actual digital ledger. I need his hard drive." "He keeps an encrypted, mirrored backup drive," I said instantly. "He's a control freak. He doesn't trust the cloud for his dirty money. He keeps a physical drive at his house in Queen Anne." "And you have a restraining order," Evelyn reminded me, raising an eyebrow. "If you step foot on that property, you're in cuffs." "I know," I said, a dangerous, quiet calm settling over me. "That's why I'm not going to be the one who goes inside." It took me less than 3 hours to track down Amanda Cole's daily routine. When you date a narcissist with a lot of money, your life becomes highly predictable. They like you to be seen in the right places. At 10 a.m. on a crisp Wednesday morning, I parked my sedan across the street from a boutique Pilates studio in Bellevue, a wealthy suburb east of Seattle. I sat in the driver's seat, sipping a black coffee, watching the entrance. At exactly 10:15, Amanda walked out. She was stunning, tall, blonde, dressed in matching high-end athletic wear. But as she stood on the sidewalk waiting for her Uber, my analytical brain picked up on the micro expressions. Her shoulders were slumped. She was furiously checking her phone, her brow furrowed in anxiety. She looked emotionally exhausted. I knew that look. I had worn it for years. I got out of my car and walked across the street. "Amanda?" She looked up, startled. When her eyes focused on me, a flash of recognition crossed her face, immediately followed by a defensive glare. Robert had clearly shown her photos of me. "You're Sarah," Amanda said, her voice dripping with practiced disdain. She took a step back, crossing her arms. On her left wrist, the $25,000 diamond tennis bracelet caught the morning sun. "What the hell are you doing here? Robert told me you were a psycho-stalker. If you don't back off, I'm calling the cops." "Call them," I said calmly, not taking the bait. I kept my distance, my voice low and completely devoid of malice. "But before you do, you might want to look at what's in this folder." I held out a plain manila envelope. Amanda scoffed, though her eyes darted nervously to the envelope. "I know all about you. Robert told me how you cheated on him, how you faked the kid's paternity, how you're trying to ruin his life because you're bitter. I'm not playing your sick games." "Amanda, look at me," I said, dropping the corporate auditor mask and letting the raw, exhausted mother bleed through. "I am not here to fight you over Robert. You can have him. I am here to keep you out of federal prison." That stopped her. The color drained from her perfectly bronzed cheeks. "What?" "Robert is under investigation for federal wire fraud and money laundering." I lied smoothly. The FBI wasn't involved yet, but they would be. When the feds kick down his door, they are going to freeze every single asset tied to his name. If you are holding the bag, if you are wearing stolen assets, you go down as a co-conspirator. Just look at the papers. She hesitated for a long, agonizing second, then snatched the envelope from my hand. We walked to a quiet bench near a manicured park away from the studio. Amanda opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were screenshots of the GoFundMe page. $185,400 raised for Emma's leukemia treatment. Beneath that, the photo I had taken of the offshore wire transfer. And finally, the digital receipt from Cascade Fine Jewelers for $25,000. Amanda stared at the jewelry receipt, then slowly looked down at the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Her breathing grew shallow. "He told me his insurance was covering the hospital bills," Amanda whispered, her voice cracking. "He said the GoFundMe was just community support for incidentals. He told me he bought this bracelet with his quarterly firm bonus." "He bought it with the money strangers donated to save my 10-year-old daughter's life," I said softly, letting the brutal reality sink in. "My daughter, Amanda. She's in the ICU right now. Her hair is falling out. She almost died on Thursday. And he's using her cancer to buy you diamonds and pay off his offshore bookies." Amanda squeezed her eyes shut, a tear cutting through her makeup. Oh my God, I'm wearing blood money." She started to frantically unclasp the bracelet, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't work the latch. I reached out and gently stilled her hands. "Don't take it off yet. If you suddenly return it or confront him, he'll know I got to you. He'll destroy the hard drives and he will walk away clean." Amanda looked up at me, her defenses completely shattered. I saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't a gold digger. She was just the latest victim of a master manipulator. "He tracks my phone, Sarah," she choked out, the floodgates opening. "He installed a GPS app on my car. If I don't text him back within 5 minutes, he completely loses his mind. He yells at me until I feel like I'm nothing. He told me I was crazy for thinking he was hiding things. He gaslights me constantly." "I know," I said, my heart aching with a dark, familiar empathy. "He did the exact same thing to me. He isolated me, made me doubt my own sanity, and then he paid a doctor to diagnose me as unstable so he could steal my children. But we can stop him, Amanda. We can end this right now." Amanda wiped her face with the back of her hand, taking a deep, shuddering breath. "What do you need me to do?" "I need his physical backup drive," I said, leaning in closer. "The encrypted one he keeps in his home office." "He keeps it in the bottom right drawer of his mahogany desk," Amanda said instantly. a fierce, vengeful spark igniting in her tear-filled eyes. It's a heavy, black, solid-state drive, but the drawer is locked and he carries the key on his keychain. My auditor brain spun. Does he have a secondary backup, a flash drive? No, but he takes his Ambien at 11 p.m. every night, Amanda said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Once he's out, a bomb couldn't wake him. I can slip the key off his ring, get the drive, and put the key back. If he catches you, he won't, she said firmly. She looked down at the $25,000 bracelet, her lip curling in pure disgust. He thinks I'm just a dumb, pretty accessory. He thinks he owns me. I'll meet you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. at the coffee shop across from his subdivision. Have a laptop ready. I can't steal the physical drive because he checks it every morning, but I can clone it to a USB if you show me how. I reached into my bag and pulled out a high-speed 2 terabyte encrypted flash drive I had prepped with Jess. I handed it to her. Plug the black drive into his laptop. Plug this flash drive into the other port. Drag the master folder labeled Sterling Holdings into this drive. It will take less than 10 minutes. Amanda gripped the flash drive tight, her knuckles turning white. I'm going to help you put this son of a bitch behind bars, Sarah. For your little girl. And for me. We stood up. For a brief, surreal moment, the psycho ex-wife and the mistress looked at each other, united by a profound, unspoken sisterhood of survival. Be careful, Amanda, I said. You too, she replied, slipping the drive into her gym bag. I walked back to my car, the adrenaline coursing through my veins like ice water. Robert had built an empire on isolating women, pitting them against each other, making them feel small and crazy. But he had fundamentally underestimated us. He didn't know it yet, but the walls were rapidly closing in. We were coming for his money, we were coming for his reputation, and most importantly, I was coming for my girls. The next morning, the Seattle sky was a bruised, heavy purple, threatening a downpour that never quite materialized. I sat in my sedan outside a bustling Starbucks in Bellevue, the engine idling. At 8:05 a.m., the passenger door opened and a blast of cold air rushed in. Amanda slid into the seat, pulling the hood of her oversized sweatshirt down. She looked like she hadn't slept a wink. Her hands were shaking as she reached into her large leather tote bag and pulled out a small silver USB drive. I got it, Amanda breathed, her voice raspy. I cloned the entire Sterling Holdings master folder, financials, PDFs, everything. He was dead to the world on his Ambien. Amanda, you have no idea what you just did for my daughters, I said, taking the drive. It felt heavier than it actually was. It felt like a loaded weapon. There's something else, she said, reaching into the back seat and hauling a battered, dusty cardboard banker's box over the console. It landed heavily on the passenger floorboard. When he woke up this morning, he was in a frantic, manic mood. He dragged this box out of his closet and told me to take it to the industrial shredder at his firm. He said it was just ancient tax junk from before the twins were born, but he was acting super twitchy about it. I figured, well, you're the auditor. I looked at the dusty box. You're a lifesaver, Amanda, truly. Now, you need to go pack a bag. The second I hand this drive over to Evelyn and the FBI, things are going to get incredibly ugly. Get out of his house today. Amanda nodded, a hard, determined look settling over her features. I'm staying at my sister's place in Portland. Burn him to the ground, Sarah. She slipped out of the car, and I immediately merged onto the I-5, heading straight for my office to meet Jess and Evelyn. I had the smoking gun. We had his offshore ledgers. We were going to win. But I had underestimated the sheer, terrifying speed of a narcissist backed into a corner. By the time I walked into my office, the atmosphere was completely toxic. The phones were ringing off the hook, but nobody was answering them. Jess was standing behind the reception desk, her face entirely devoid of color, staring at her laptop screen. Jess, what's going on? I got the drive, I said, holding up the USB. Jess didn't look relieved. She looked sick. She slowly turned the laptop screen around to face me. Sarah, he beat us to the punch. He went scorched earth. I dropped my bag on the floor and stared at the screen. It was Facebook. Robert's public profile. He had posted a video at 6 a.m. and it had already racked up over 50,000 views, hundreds of shares, and thousands of comments. The caption read, "A betrayed father's nightmare. Please share." I hit play. There was Robert sitting in his meticulously staged home office, looking utterly defeated. He looked directly into the camera, his eyes red and brimming with unshed tears. "I never wanted to bring my private family pain onto the internet," Robert began, his voice a masterclass in manufactured heartbreak. "As many of you know, my sweet 10-year-old daughter Emma is currently in the ICU fighting leukemia. But 2 days ago, a routine hospital DNA test revealed a truth that has completely shattered my world. My ex-wife, Sarah, she lied to me." My blood turned to ice. No, 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 no. "The DNA test proved that Emma is not my biological daughter," Robert continued, letting a tear finally fall. "Sarah had an affair. She committed paternity fraud, passing off another man's child as my own for 10 years. I loved Emma. I provided for her. And now Sarah is using this medical tragedy to try and strip me of my rights to my other daughter, Chloe, who is biologically mine. She is a vindictive, unstable woman who manipulated my entire life, and now she is trying to tear my remaining family apart." The video faded to black. I couldn't breathe. The room started to spin. He hadn't just exposed my deepest, most agonizing mistake to our entire social circle. He had weaponized it. He was laying the groundwork. If I came forward now and accused him of starving Chloe or embezzling the GoFundMe money, I would just look like the psychotic, lying, cheating ex-wife trying to ruin an innocent, grieving father. He had completely assassinated my character in the court of public opinion. "Look at the comments," Jess whispered, her voice shaking. I scrolled down, my vision blurring. What an absolute piece of trash. How could a mother do that? "Robert, you are a saint for putting up with her. Fight for Chloe. She belongs in jail for paternity fraud. Keep that psycho away from those kids." "Wow, what a gold digger. Praying for you, Robert." "My email is blowing up too," I choked out, watching my inbox notifications tick upward. Clients were emailing to cancel their accounts. Mutual friends were sending me paragraphs of disgust. I had been publicly, digitally stoned. My cell phone rang. It was David. I answered it, a sob ripping through my throat. "David?" He told everyone. He told the whole world. "I know. I saw it," David said. His voice was a low, steady rumble of absolute fury, but none of it was directed at me. "Sarah, listen to me. Turn off your phone. Do not look at the comments. Do not respond to anyone. I am at the hospital with the girls right now. They are safe. Emma's white count ticked up slightly this morning, the graft is taking, and Chloe is sitting right here next to me, eating a blueberry muffin." Hearing that anchored me just enough to stop hyperventilating. "He's going to use this to take Chloe, David. He's filing an emergency injunction. The public thinks I'm a monster." "The public doesn't know a damn thing," David said fiercely. "You are an amazing mother. You made one mistake a decade ago and you were manipulated into returning to an abuser. Do not let him rewrite your reality. You have the flash drive, right?" "Yes." "Then do your job, Sarah. Gut him." I hung up the phone. I wiped my face with the sleeves of my sweater, the fabric rough against my tear-stained skin. I looked down at the dusty cardboard box Amanda had dragged out of his closet. "He asked me to shred this old crap last night. Thought you might want it." Robert didn't throw things away randomly. If he wanted this shredded today, the morning he launched his public smear campaign, it wasn't just ancient tax junk, it was a liability. "Jess, call Evelyn," I ordered, my voice dropping into that hyper-focused, dead calm register of an auditor staring down a massive discrepancy. "Tell her we have the clone drive with the offshore wire transfers. Send it to her via the secure portal." "What are you going to do?" Jess asked, already reaching for the desk phone. "I'm going to find out what he's so desperate to hide from 2014. I dragged the heavy banker's box into my private office and locked the door. I dumped the contents onto the floor. Dust motes danced in the fluorescent light. It was a chaotic mess of old files. Bank statements from our engagement year, old medical receipts, utility bills, and junk mail. I sat cross-legged on the carpet and started sorting. My C-type personality, compliance, and systematic analysis took the wheel. I sorted the papers chronologically. 2013, January 2014, March 2014. I stopped at May 2014. The month before our massive fight. The month before I slept with David. The month before I got pregnant. I pulled out a thick, sealed envelope from a private urology clinic in downtown Seattle. It was addressed to Robert. I ripped it open. It was a comprehensive lab report. I scanned the medical jargon, my eyes landing on the final diagnostic summary at the bottom of the page. Patient: Robert Sterling. Diagnosis: mild to moderate oligospermia. Sperm concentration significantly below normal parameters. Natural conception highly unlikely without extensive medical intervention. I stared at the paper. Natural conception highly unlikely. Robert knew he had fertility issues. He had known before we got pregnant. He had never told me. But if he knew it was nearly impossible for him to get me pregnant, why was he so thrilled when I announced I was carrying twins? Why hadn't he questioned it? Unless he thought he had fixed the game. My hands began to tremble. I dove back into the pile of papers from May and June 2014. I needed his credit card statements. I threw aside utility bills and old restaurant receipts until I found his American Express Platinum statement from June 2014. I ran my finger down the itemized charges. June 2nd, Morton's Steakhouse. June 4th, Shell Gas. June 9th, RX Direct Online Pharmacy. Wait, why was he buying something from an unverified online international pharmacy? We had premium health insurance. We picked up our prescriptions at the local Walgreens. I grabbed my laptop and typed in the URL listed on the credit card statement. The site was defunct, but I used the Wayback Machine, an internet archive tool, to pull up the site as it existed in 2014. It was a shady, unregulated website that sold novelty pharmaceuticals, generic Viagra, and theatrical props. I pulled up a secondary OSINT database, running a deep trace on the specific merchant ID code listed on Robert's statement. The database pulled up the exact invoice manifest for that transaction. I read the item description and the air completely vanished from the room. Item: 3-month supply. Placebo contraceptive pills. Visual match orthotricycline. My heart stopped. I literally felt the physical sensation of my reality fracturing, the ground dropping out from underneath me. Orthotricycline. That was my exact birth control brand in 2014. I remembered it so vividly. Robert was so controlling, so obsessed with managing every aspect of our lives that he insisted on organizing my daily pill organizer. "You're so busy, babe. Let me take care of this so you never miss a day," he used to say, smiling that charming, perfect smile. He hadn't been taking care of me. He had been trapping me. He knew our relationship was falling apart. He knew I was packing my bags to leave him. So he went online, bought fake sugar pills that looked exactly like my birth control, and swapped them out in my pill organizer. He had intentionally, methodically sabotaged my birth control to force a pregnancy, knowing that if I had his baby, I would be tied to him forever. It was reproductive coercion. It was one of the most insidious, deeply violating forms of domestic abuse imaginable. And the ultimate sick irony? Because he had oligospermia, his plan failed. He couldn't get me pregnant. But because he had stripped me of my contraception, when I had that one moment of weakness with David, that was when I conceived the twins. The 2 eggs, the 2 fathers. It all stemmed from Robert's sick, controlling manipulation. I had spent 11 years carrying the agonizing guilt of my infidelity. I had let Robert degrade me, punish me, and convince the courts I was an unfit, cheating monster. But I wasn't the monster. I was a hostage. I sat on the floor of my office, clutching the American Express statement and the fake pill invoice to my chest, and I began to scream. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated, feral rage. The public was currently crucifying me online for being a deceitful, lying wife. Robert was currently playing the grieving, betrayed victim on Facebook, trying to use the DNA results to steal Chloe from me forever. I looked at the documents in my hands. "You want to play the victim, Robert?" I thought, my tears drying up, replaced by a cold, lethal clarity. "You want to take my daughters? Let's go to court." I stood up, grabbing the documents and the cloned USB drive. The executioner had her weapon, and I was going to use it to cut his head clean off. By the time December 12th, 2025 rolled around, the Seattle air was biting cold, but the blood in my veins had turned to absolute liquid nitrogen. The last 3 months had been a grueling 2-front war. On the medical front, we had experienced a genuine miracle. David's stem cells had successfully engrafted. Emma's white blood cell count had slowly, stubbornly climbed out of the danger zone. She was still weak, completely bald, and living in a sterile, specialized rehab facility, but she was in remission. David visited her every single day, drawing her castles and ducks with swords, proving that DNA was only a tiny fraction of what made someone a father. But on the legal front, it was an absolute bloodbath. Robert's viral Facebook video had done exactly what he intended. It whipped the internet into a misogynistic frenzy. I was doxxed. Mommy bloggers made hour-long podcast episodes analyzing my narcissistic paternity fraud. I couldn't go to the grocery store without wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. Through it all, Evelyn Vance, my razor-sharp attorney, told me to do one thing: stay completely silent. Let him dig his own grave, Evelyn had said, sipping her espresso as we organized the cloned hard drive files. The louder a man screams on the internet, the harder he falls in a courtroom. We strike when he's completely out of breath. Today was the day we were swinging the axe. I walked into the King County Family Courthouse wearing a tailored navy blue suit, my hair pulled back into a severe, no-nonsense bun. I wasn't the weeping, broken woman who had stood in this exact same room 2 years ago. I was a forensic auditor, and I was carrying a leather briefcase packed with heavily indexed, irrefutable receipts. Evelyn walked beside me, her heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floor. "You ready for this, Sarah?" "I've been ready for 836 days, I replied quietly. We entered courtroom 4B. The Honorable Judge Arthur Ramirez was presiding, the exact same judge who had handed Robert sole custody 2 years ago. Robert was already seated at the petitioner's table with his high-priced bulldog of an attorney, Arthur Davis. Robert was playing the part to perfection. He wore a subdued, charcoal gray suit, his shoulders slightly slumped to project the image of a weary, heartbroken single father. When I walked in, he didn't even look at me. He just shook his head, like my mere presence was a tragic burden he was forced to bear. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Ramirez took the bench. He was a no-nonsense man in his 60s with a thick mustache and zero patience for courtroom theatrics. "Be seated," Judge Ramirez grumbled, opening the thick file in front of him. "We are here on an emergency motion filed by the petitioner, Mr. Robert Sterling, seeking to permanently terminate the parental rights of the respondent, Ms. Sarah Jenkins, regarding the minor child, Chloe Sterling. Mr. Davis, the floor is yours." Arthur Davis stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "Thank you, Your Honor. We are here today because my client has been the victim of a staggering, decade-long deception. As the court is aware from the recent DNA filings, Ms. Jenkins committed egregious paternity fraud, passing off another man's child as Mr. Sterling's for 10 years. This deceit alone demonstrates a profound lack of moral character." Davis paused, letting the heavy words hang in the air, gesturing dramatically toward Robert, who kept his eyes fixed mournfully on the table. "But more importantly, Your Honor," Davis continued, his voice rising in a righteous indignation, "we must look at Ms. Jenkins's documented history. 2 years ago, this very court granted my client sole custody based on a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Martin Strauss. Dr. Strauss concluded that Ms. Jenkins suffers from severe emotional instability, erratic behavior, and presents a psychological danger to these children. Given her recent lies and this established medical history, we ask that you terminate her rights to Chloe immediately to protect the child from further emotional abuse." Judge Ramirez nodded slowly, looking over his glasses at me. "Ms. Vance, your client's deceit regarding the twins' paternity is highly troubling. How do you respond to the psychiatric evaluation?" Evelyn stood up slowly. She didn't rush. She adjusted her reading glasses, picked up a single crisp manila folder from our table, and walked toward the center podium. "Your Honor," Evelyn began, her voice smooth as glass, "opposing counsel is relying heavily on the 2023 psychiatric evaluation authored by Dr. Martin Strauss. Mr. Davis paints it as the cornerstone of Mr. Sterling's fitness as a parent." "It was a thorough 40-page diagnostic report," Judge Ramirez noted. "It was 40 pages of highly expensive fiction," Evelyn countered instantly. The courtroom temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Your Honor, I would like to submit Exhibit A into evidence." Evelyn handed a copy of the document to the bailiff, who passed it up to the judge. She then walked over and slapped a copy face down on Robert's table. Robert's jaw twitched. "Exhibit A is an official certified disciplinary record from the Washington State Medical Quality Assurance Commission," Evelyn stated loudly, making sure her voice carried to the back of the room. Dated November 14th, 2022, exactly 9 months before Dr. Strauss wrote that psychological evaluation on my client. Judge Ramirez adjusted his glasses, scanning the document. His thick eyebrows shot up toward his hairline. As you can see, Your Honor, Evelyn continued, pacing slowly, like a shark circling a bleeding seal. Doctor? Martin Strauss had his medical license permanently revoked in 2022 for massive prescription fraud and illegal kickbacks to feed a severe gambling addiction. When he interviewed my client and submitted that report to this court in August 2023, he was not a licensed psychiatrist. He was legally barred from practicing medicine in the state of Washington. Objection! Arthur Davis shouted, leaping out of his chair, his face flushed red. We had no knowledge of Dr. Strauss's licensing issues. This is an ambush. Sit down, mister. Davis, Judge Ramirez barked, his eyes blazing as he stared at the paper. Judges absolutely despise being made to look like fools in their own courtrooms. Is this document authentic, Ms. Vance? It is directly from the state registry, Your Honor, Evelyn said, but that is not the worst of it. The petitioner claims he had no knowledge of Dr. Strauss's disgraced status. However, as a forensic auditor, my client, Ms. Jenkins, knows how to follow the money. I sat up a little straighter. I locked eyes with Robert. The smug, exhausted father facade was cracking. A sheen of nervous sweat had broken out on his forehead. Evelyn pulled a second document from her folder. I submit Exhibit B. This is a wire transfer log obtained via legal discovery from an LLC managed exclusively by Robert Sterling. Look at the highlighted line, Your Honor. Dated August 2nd, 2023. Exactly 1 week before Dr. Strauss miraculously produced a 40-page report declaring my client an unfit mother. The bailiff handed the document to the judge. Mr. Sterling wired exactly $15,000 to a personal checking account belonging to Martin Strauss, Evelyn announced, her voice echoing off the mahogany walls. It was labeled consulting fees. Your Honor, Robert Sterling didn't just unknowingly hire a disgraced doctor. He actively sought out a desperate, unlicensed gambling addict and bribed him $15,000 to commit perjury and defraud this court, all so he could steal my client's children. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was deafening. I watched Robert. For 10 years, this man had meticulously controlled every narrative. He had gaslit me until I didn't know which way was up. He had posted a video calling me a psycho. But right now, he looked like a cornered rat. This is absurd, Robert blurted out, losing his composure, ignoring his lawyer's frantic hand gestures to stay quiet. She hacked my accounts. That document is stolen property. Ah, Evelyn said, spinning around to face him with a terrifying wolfish grin. So, you don't deny the transaction exists, Mr. Sterling? You only object to how we found it? Robert snapped his mouth shut, realizing his fatal mistake. Judge Ramirez slammed his gavel down so hard it echoed like a gunshot. Order! Mr. Sterling, you will speak only when spoken to, or I will hold you in contempt of court. The judge took a deep, stabilizing breath, his face dark with fury as he looked at the wire transfer. Fraud upon the court is a felony offense. Bribery of a witness is a felony offense. I am striking the 2023 custody order from the record immediately. It is vacated as of this second. I closed my eyes, letting out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 2 straight years. Vacated. The legal chains he had wrapped around my throat were finally broken. Your Honor, please, Arthur Davis pleaded, trying to salvage the sinking ship. Even if the psychiatric report is stricken, the fact remains that Ms. Jenkins committed paternity fraud. She lied about the twins' biology. Mr. Sterling is the only fit parent. Fit parent? Evelyn cut him off, her voice dropping the polite courtroom veneer and turning to pure, unfiltered venom. Your Honor, Mr. Davis brings up the issue of the twins' conception. He calls it a deceit, a lie. My client has been publicly crucified on the internet for the past 3 months over this so-called paternity fraud. But since we are looking at receipts today, I believe it is time we show the court exactly how that rare biological anomaly occurred. Evelyn walked back to my table. She picked up the heavy banker's box, the one Amanda had dragged out of Robert's closet. She lifted it up and placed it squarely on the petitioner's table, right in front of Robert. A puff of dust plumed into the air. Robert stared at the box, and for the first time in his entire miserable life, I saw genuine, unadulterated terror in his eyes. He recognized it. Your Honor, Evelyn said, pulling out a stack of documents I had meticulously color-coded and tabbed. The fraudulent psychiatric report is merely the appetizer. Wait until you see what Mr. Sterling was doing in the summer of 2014. Evelyn didn't just open the dusty banker's box. She treated it like a crime scene. She carefully extracted the color-coded files I had prepped the night before, laying them out on the judge's bench with the precision of a surgeon laying out scalpels. Your Honor, Evelyn began, the entire courtroom hanging on her every syllable. Opposing counsel has spent the last 3 months spearheading a vicious public smear campaign against my client, branding her a deceitful adulterer who committed paternity fraud. He claims Mr. Sterling is the innocent, betrayed victim. Let's look at the actual timeline of this so-called betrayal. She held up the first document, her voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. Exhibit C, a certified medical diagnostic report from Seattle Urology dated May 14, 2014. 1 month before the twins were conceived. The patient is Robert Sterling. The diagnosis, severe oligospermia. The attending physician explicitly noted that Mr. Sterling's natural conception probability was less than 5%. Arthur Davis, Robert's lawyer, blinked in rapid confusion. He clearly hadn't been prepped for this. Your Honor, relevance, my client's medical history from 11 years ago has nothing to do with... It has everything to do with it, Mr. Davis. Evelyn fired back, not missing a beat. She pulled the second piece of paper from the stack. Because 2 weeks after receiving a diagnosis that he was practically infertile, my client informed Mr. Sterling she was leaving him due to his controlling behavior. And how did he respond? I submit Exhibit D. Evelyn slapped the American Express credit card statement and the deep web invoice manifest onto the overhead projector. The text was magnified on the massive screen behind the judge's bench. Item: 3-month supply. Placebo contraceptive pills, visual match, orthotricycline. A collective, horrified gasp rippled through the gallery. Even the stoic court reporter stopped typing for a split second, her eyes going wide. Robert Sterling went to an unregulated offshore pharmacy and purchased sugar pills specifically designed to look exactly like my client's prescribed birth control, Evelyn said, her voice dripping with absolute disgust. He managed her daily pill organizer. He swapped them out. He intentionally sabotaged her contraception to force a pregnancy, knowing a child would trap her in the relationship. I watched Judge Ramirez. His face had gone completely pale. He looked from the screen down to Robert, who was gripping the edge of the defense table so hard his knuckles were bone white. This is called reproductive coercion, Your Honor, Evelyn stated firmly. It is a severe, calculated form of domestic abuse. The only reason his sick plan failed to produce his child that night was because of his own infertility. But he left my client completely unprotected. When she had a brief, single encounter with her ex-boyfriend during their separation, she conceived the twins. She didn't lie to him for 10 years. She was a hostage to a biological phenomenon triggered by his own predatory manipulation. Lies! Robert suddenly roared, slamming his fist on the table. The suave, composed attorney facade completely shattered, revealing the unhinged, raging narcissist underneath. She planted that. She's a psychotic, hacking bitch. Bailiff, restrain him! Judge Ramirez bellowed, rising half out of his chair. A heavy-set court officer immediately stepped up behind Robert, resting a heavy hand on his shoulder. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, or you will spend the night in county lockup, Judge Ramirez warned, his voice shaking with fury. He turned back to Evelyn. Ms. Vance, this is highly disturbing evidence of past abuse, but we are here to determine the current safety and placement of the minor child, Chloe. I'm well aware, Your Honor, Evelyn said, her eyes flashing. Which brings me to Mr. Sterling's current activities. He claims he is the only fit parent. He claims he is desperately trying to save his daughter Emma from leukemia. But as my client, a forensic auditor, discovered, Robert Sterling's idea of saving his daughter involves funding his mistress's jewelry collection. Evelyn pulled out the final manila folder, the kill shot. I submit Exhibit E. This is a clone mirror of Mr. Sterling's encrypted solid-state drive, legally obtained and verified. It contains the complete financial ledgers for a shell company called Sterling Holdings, LLC. Robert went perfectly, deathly still. All the color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax corpse. Over the past month, Robert Sterling has raised $185,400 through a public GoFundMe campaign called Emma's Fight, Evelyn detailed, passing the spreadsheets to the judge. He has not paid a single dime to Seattle Children's Hospital. Instead, he wired $140,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands to cover illegal sports betting debts. 2 days before Emma went into septic shock, he used $25,000 of cancer charity funds to purchase a diamond tennis bracelet at Cascade Fine Jewelers for his 26-year-old girlfriend. Arthur Davis literally dropped his pen. It clattered loudly onto the wooden table. He looked at his client with a mixture of professional horror and personal revulsion. "This isn't just a family court matter anymore, Your Honor," Evelyn concluded, crossing her arms. "It is federal wire fraud. It is charity embezzlement. I have already forwarded this entire clone drive to the FBI's white-collar crime division here in Seattle. They are currently seeking a federal indictment." The courtroom felt like it was vibrating. Robert was hyperventilating. His eyes darted wildly around the room, looking at the exits, looking at the judge, looking at me. A narcissist's greatest fear isn't losing. It's being exposed. It's having the mask ripped off in public. And his mask hadn't just been ripped off, it had been incinerated. "Your Honor," Arthur Davis stammered, his voice weak. He was a bulldog, but he wasn't going to go down with a sinking, felonious ship. My client is experiencing a severe medical emergency. He is hyperventilating. We request a 15-minute recess for him to compose himself and use the restroom." Judge Ramirez looked at Robert with nothing but absolute disdain. 15 minutes, Mr. Davis. But be warned, based on the evidence presented, I am fully prepared to rule from the bench the second we reconvene. Do not leave this building, Mr. Sterling. The gavel banged. The bailiff stepped back. Robert practically sprinted out of the courtroom, his lawyer trailing behind him. Evelyn let out a long, heavy exhale, turning to me with a triumphant smile. "We got him, Sarah. He's done. The judge is going to grant you full legal and physical custody, and the feds will have him in cuffs by Friday." I should have felt elated. I should have felt the crushing weight of 2 years lift off my chest. But I didn't. My heart was pounding a frantic, erratic rhythm against my ribs. I looked at the empty petitioner's table. Robert had left his briefcase, but his cell phone and his car keys were gone. My analytical brain started connecting the dots at warp speed. Robert was an absolute control freak. He viewed Chloe not as a daughter, but as a piece of property, an extension of his ego. He had just realized he was going to federal prison, his law career was over, and his reputation was destroyed. A man like that, a man who would starve a 10-year-old girl just to make a point, doesn't just go to the bathroom and cry. When a narcissist realizes the ship is sinking, they try to take their possessions down with them. "Evelyn!" I gasped, the blood rushing out of my head. "He's not in the bathroom." "What?" "Sarah, the bailiff is at the door. He took his car keys. He parked in the underground garage. There's an elevator right by the restrooms," I yelled, already grabbing my purse and sprinting for the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom. "He's going for Chloe!" I burst out into the hallway, pulling my phone from my pocket with shaking hands. I hit David's speed dial. Come on, pick up," I chanted, sprinting toward the elevators. "Hey, Sarah, how's it?" David answered. "David, lock the door," I screamed, ignoring the startled looks of the lawyers in the hallway. "Lock Emma's hospital room door right now. Robert is running. He knows he's going to prison. He's coming to the hospital to take Chloe." "What?" David's voice instantly shifted from calm to a hard, lethal edge. "Sarah, calm down. I'm right here. I've got them." "I'm on my way," I sobbed, jamming the elevator button. "Do not let him near her." The drive from the downtown courthouse to Seattle Children's Hospital usually took 20 minutes. I made it in 10, blowing through 2 red lights and practically abandoning my car in the emergency drop-off zone. I sprinted through the automatic doors, my lungs burning, my heels slipping on the polished linoleum. I bypassed the elevators and hit the stairwell, taking the concrete steps 2 at a time until I reached the 4th floor. I burst through the heavy fire doors into the pediatric ICU wing. Chaos had already erupted. Down the hallway, outside room 412, a nurse was shouting. The crash cart had been knocked over, spilling sterile supplies across the floor, and there was Robert. His suit jacket was gone. His tie was ripped open. He looked completely unhinged, his eyes wide and manic. He was trying to shove his way into the hospital room, but the doorway was completely blocked by a solid wall of muscle and quiet, furious determination. David. David was standing square in the doorframe, his feet planted, his arms braced against the door jambs. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. The look on his face was terrifying enough. "Move out of my way, you piece of garbage!" Robert spat, shoving hard against David's chest. "She is my biological daughter. I am taking her out of this hospital right now." David didn't budge a single inch. He just grabbed Robert by the lapels of his expensive shirt and shoved him backward into the hallway with enough force to make Robert stumble. "You aren't taking anyone anywhere, Robert," David said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that echoed down the hall. "If you try to step foot in this room again, I will break your jaw." "She's mine!" Robert screamed, looking past David into the room. "Chloe, get your coat. We are leaving right now. Your mother is trying to steal you. Get out here." I froze about 20 feet away, my heart in my throat. I saw the security guards sprinting down the hall from the opposite elevator bank. But then the most incredible thing happened. From inside the room, a small figure stepped forward. It was Chloe. She was still thin, still fragile, but she wasn't hiding in the corner anymore. She was holding a half-eaten blueberry muffin in one hand, and she was standing tall. The past week with David, the quiet respect, the drawing, the unconditional food had cracked the foundation of Robert's brainwashing. She walked right up to David's side and looked past him, locking eyes with the man who had starved and terrified her for 2 years. "Chloe, let's go," Robert demanded, holding out his hand, expecting absolute obedience. Chloe looked at his hand. Then she looked at me standing in the hallway. Her dark eyes flashed with a sudden, brilliant fire. "No," Chloe said. Her voice was small, but it was incredibly steady. Robert blinked, genuinely shocked. "What did you say to me?" "I said no," Chloe repeated, taking a step forward and grabbing the hem of David's shirt for support. She pointed a tiny, trembling finger right at Robert's chest. "You are a bad man. You hurt me. You hurt Emma. You took away my mommy." "Chloe," Robert started, stepping forward. "You're not my dad," Chloe screamed, the raw, visceral emotion finally tearing out of her. "I hate you. Don't you ever come near us again." Robert recoiled as if he had been physically struck. The ultimate narcissistic injury, being publicly rejected by the possession he thought he controlled completely. Before he could recover, 3 hospital security guards tackled him from behind. They hit the floor in a tangle of limbs, pinning Robert's arms behind his back. "Robert Sterling, do not move," a guard shouted, slapping heavy zip ties around his wrists. I didn't care about Robert anymore. He was dust. I ran forward, dropping to my knees right in the doorway. "Mommy!" Chloe cried, dropping the muffin. She ran past David and threw herself into my arms. I caught her, burying my face in her neck, holding her so tight I thought our ribs might crack. She was crying, but they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of pure, unadulterated relief. David knelt down beside us, wrapping his large, warm arms around both of us, forming an impenetrable shield. I looked up at him through my tears. He was looking at Chloe with so much pride, so much love, it took my breath away. Over the sound of Robert screaming obscenities as security dragged him toward the freight elevators, I held my daughter tight. The war was over. The house of cards had completely collapsed. We were finally safe. Justice in the real world rarely looks like it does in the movies. There are usually no dramatic confessions on the witness stand, no swelling orchestral music. But standing in the United States District Court in downtown Seattle in late December 2025, listening to the sharp, definitive crack of a federal judge's gavel, I realized that true justice sounds exactly like a perfectly balanced ledger. It sounds like zero discrepancies. Robert Sterling stood before federal judge Miriam Hayes wearing a standard-issue bright orange King County jumpsuit. He looked small. The Armani suits, the custom silk ties, the arrogant, practiced smirk that had terrorized me for a decade, all of it had been stripped away. He was pale, his hair unkempt, and his hands were cuffed in front of him. Evelyn Vance stood beside me in the gallery, her arms crossed, watching her masterpiece unfold. "Robert Sterling," Judge Hayes began, her voice ringing out with absolute chilling authority. "You have been found guilty of 2 counts of federal wire fraud, 1 count of charity embezzlement, and 1 count of perjury. You exploited the terminal illness of a 10-year-old child to solicit hundreds of thousands of dollars from a compassionate public, only to launder those funds offshore to fuel your own gambling addictions and vanity purchases." Robert stared at the floor. He didn't dare look back at me. He had tried to play the victim during the trial, but the FBI had brought down a mountain of evidence so heavy it crushed his defense in a matter of days. "Furthermore," Judge Hayes continued, looking over her glasses with visceral disgust, The family court has forwarded evidence of reproductive coercion and severe psychological abuse against your dependents. You are a predator who used his legal expertise to manipulate the justice system and terrorize his own family. That ends today." The courtroom was completely silent. "I am sentencing you to 12 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of early parole," Judge Hayes declared. "Your assets are hereby frozen and seized to pay full restitution to the GoFundMe donors and Seattle Children's Hospital. The Washington State Bar Association has permanently revoked your license to practice law. You will have no contact, physical or digital, with Sarah Jenkins or her children for the duration of your sentence and the subsequent 10 years of your supervised release." 12 years. I let out a breath that I felt like I had been holding since 2014. Evelyn reached over and gave my shoulder a rare, firm squeeze. As the federal marshals grabbed Robert by the arms and led him toward the side door, he finally looked up. His eyes met mine across the crowded courtroom. There was no rage left. There was only the hollow, pathetic panic of a man who had finally hit a wall he couldn't manipulate his way over. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just turned my back on him and walked out into the crisp, freezing Seattle air. He was a closed account, a zeroed-out balance. He was nothing. 2 months later, February 14th, 2026. The morning sun was pouring through the large bay windows of the new 4-bedroom craftsman house I had rented in a quiet, leafy suburb of Seattle. The smell of melting chocolate and vanilla extract drifted through the hallway, accompanied by the sound of actual, genuine laughter. I walked into the kitchen and leaned against the doorframe, letting the scene wash over me. Chloe was standing on a step stool by the marble island, her hands covered in flour, wearing a bright pink apron. She was furiously mixing a bowl of brownie batter. She wasn't the frail, terrified shadow I had found in that hospital room 6 months ago. She had gained 15 pounds. Her cheeks were full and rosy, her eyes bright and mischievous. She didn't hide saltine crackers in her pockets anymore. She ate when she was hungry, and she left food on her plate when she was full, knowing with absolute certainty that there would always be a next meal. Sitting on one of the bar stools across from her, wearing a paper crown and casually flipping through a thick architectural blueprint, was David. "I'm just saying," David murmured, not looking up from his blueprint. "If you add a little bit of espresso powder to the batter, it makes the chocolate taste richer. It's a scientifically proven fact. Architects know these things." "You build houses, you don't bake," Chloe countered, pointing a batter-covered wooden spoon at him. "And Mom said no caffeine, or Emma will bounce off the walls." "Fair point. The architect yields to the master baker," David chuckled, holding his hands up in surrender. He didn't live with us, but he was here almost every day. He had seamlessly integrated himself into our lives, not as a commanding patriarch demanding obedience, but as a steady, quiet pillar of support. He never forced Chloe to call him Dad. He just showed up. He brought her books, he listened to her talk about her favorite video games, and he helped her with her math homework. He proved his love through consistent, gentle actions, and in return, Chloe had started running to the door to hug him every time he knocked. "Where is the guest of honor?" David asked, looking up and catching my eye. He gave me a warm, crinkly smile that made my stomach do a familiar, adolescent flutter. "Right here," a voice called out. Emma walked into the kitchen, wearing a pair of fluffy red pajamas adorned with hearts for Valentine's Day. Her head was covered in a soft peach fuzz layer of dark hair that had finally started growing back. She looked tired, but she was glowing. Yesterday, we had stood in the oncology ward at Seattle Children's Hospital, surrounded by Dr. Aries and a team of cheering nurses. Emma had reached up and grabbed the braided rope attached to the heavy brass bell on the wall, ringing it 3 times. The sound had echoed down the hallway, signaling the end of her active chemotherapy. Her latest bone marrow biopsy had come back completely clean, 0 blast cells. The engraftment was a total success. Emma was officially in remission. "Happy Valentine's Day, my sweet girls," I said, walking over and kissing both of them on the tops of their heads. "David brought us a present," Emma said, pointing to a large, flat package resting on the dining room table. "I did," David said, standing up and walking over to the table, "but it's for all 3 of you." He untied the brown string, letting the heavy paper fall away. Inside was a beautifully framed, hand-drawn architectural sketch. It was a rendering of a massive, whimsical castle, complete with turrets, a grand drawbridge, and a moat filled with very aggressive, sword-wielding ducks. At the bottom, inscribed in elegant drafting pen calligraphy, it read, "The Jenkins Fortress, impenetrable." Chloe gasped. wiping her flour-covered hands on her apron before running over to trace the glass with her finger. "You actually drew the ducks." "I promised you a tactical defense system, didn't I?" David smiled, ruffling her hair. He looked over at me, his hazel eyes soft and completely unguarded. "Nobody is ever breaching these walls again, Sarah. I promise you that." I felt the tears prick the corners of my eyes, but for the first time in 10 years, they were tears of absolute, profound gratitude. I walked over to David, wrapping my arms around his waist and leaning my head against his chest. He immediately wrapped his arms around my shoulders, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. We were taking it slow. After a decade of trauma, I was still relearning how to trust, how to breathe without waiting for the other shoe to drop. But standing here, in a house filled with the smell of baking chocolate and the sound of my healthy, safe daughters arguing over brownie edges, I knew we were going to be okay. Numbers don't lie. For 2 years, Robert had tried to use the legal system, fake medical reports, and my own manipulated biology to zero out my worth. He had tried to convince the world I was crazy. He had tried to break my girls. But he forgot one crucial variable in his twisted equation. You can never, ever quantify the sheer, terrifying willpower of a mother fighting for her children's survival. When the dust settled, the abuser was in a cage, and my family was finally whole. If you are listening to this right now, I want you to hear me clearly. Narcissists and abusers build their entire worlds on isolation and lies. They will gaslight you until you don't trust your own memory. They will use the court system, your finances, and sometimes even your own children to make you feel like you are losing your mind. They will tell you that nobody will ever believe you. Do not believe them. The truth always leaves a paper trail. Whether it's a bank statement, a hidden text message, or just the undeniable intuition deep in your gut, the truth is there. You are not crazy, you are not alone, and you are so much stronger than the nightmare they have trapped you in. If my story resonated with you, if you have ever had to fight tooth and nail against a manipulator to protect your peace or your family, I want you to leave a comment below. Share your survival story. Let's remind each other that the truth always comes to light and that starting over isn't a weakness. It's a victory. Thank you for walking this journey with me, for sharing your cities in the comments, and for staying until the very end. Please subscribe to the channel, share this video with a woman who might need to hear it today, and never forget, your voice is your greatest weapon. Stay safe, stay strong, and I will see you in the next story.